Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I'm glad you could join me for this journey. And now, let's begin.
A few weeks ago, on a typical Thursday morning, I was in the thick of our busy routine, getting our two children ready for school. At 7:30 a.m., the chaos was briefly interrupted by the loud ring of the phone. I was curious about who could be calling at such an early hour. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar area code, which piqued my interest even further. "Hello?" I answered cautiously, holding the receiver to my ear. To my surprise, it was Claire, my wife, on the other end of the line. I couldn't help but wonder why she was calling when we had just spoken the previous evening. Claire works for a small marketing firm, and her call instantly grabbed my attention. I take care of our kids and work from home while she is constantly on the move, working out of a printing house in the heart of our city. Despite our different schedules, we manage quite well and provided a decent living. We live in a cozy 4-bedroom suburban house with a pool, and we are fortunate to have a wide circle of friends. However, Claire informed me that the previous evening when she had gone down to the hotel lobby to get a newspaper, her purse had been stolen. "Please block our credit cards immediately and order new ones urgently. I've already informed my boss, Joy, and she will arrange for new corporate American Express cards to be sent to me via overnight delivery, so I get them before I leave tomorrow. She is also wiring some money to help me out in this situation," my wife said, sounding agitated. "You're usually very careful with your things. Can you explain what exactly happened?" "Unfortunately, I was a bit distracted and left my purse on the cashier's counter when I went to get something else to read. When I returned, it was gone. The cashier said she was busy with another customer and didn't notice anything. My driver's license was in there too, but the hotel staff sent employees to check the nearby dumpsters. I hope they find it. Otherwise, I might have to take a taxi to the meeting today. Don't worry, I'll take care of the credit cards right away. Sorry for my carelessness, honey. Hopefully, apart from about $1,200 in my wallet, we won't have any additional expenses. We can replace the other cards gradually. Luckily, most of my makeup is still in the room, so I'll be ready for the morning presentation. How are the kids? I miss the times when we were all together. Let me tell you about what happened about 6 weeks ago. Fortunately, I managed to block the credit cards before any unauthorized charges went through. However, the wallet with my driver's license and other non-credit card items was never found, so I set that problem aside. Life went on as usual. But today, I have something important to share. I came across Claire's Fidelity account statement, where she manages a separate investment fund from an inheritance she received after the tragic death of her parents several years ago. I had always respected her privacy regarding this account. But while looking for our home insurance policy, I stumbled upon a folder with the monthly statements from her personal account. I recalled that the inheritance amount was around $350,000 after her parents' death, and I couldn't help but wonder how much it had grown to. To my pleasant surprise, it had exceeded $400,000. While reviewing the statement, I noticed a $3,000 withdrawal from the money market account about 6 weeks ago. My curiosity grew. What had she spent that money on? I decided to dig deeper into her money market account. To my astonishment, I discovered she had written a large check to a local jewelry store just a couple of days after she had lost her purse in that same city. I couldn't help but wonder, what did she buy at that jewelry store? She hadn't mentioned buying anything for me, and I hadn't heard her talk about acquiring jewelry for anyone else. Although she has a brother, I couldn't understand why he would need a $3,000 gift. After some thought, I decided to sit down at the computer and visit the jewelry store's website. I wrote down their phone number for further inquiries. I picked up the phone and dialed the jewelry store's number. A woman introduced herself as a store representative and asked how she could help. Giving my name and referencing the transaction I wanted to know about, I explained that we had a problem with the purchase and wanted to know if the store offered a warranty. She started looking up the transaction information on her computer and then asked about the nature of the problem with the rings. I was momentarily stunned, wondering what rings she could have bought. Fortunately, the woman on the other end of the line quickly clarified, I remember this purchase. When she visited our store, she was visibly distressed and mentioned that her wedding and engagement rings had been stolen. She wanted to replace them, which proved to be quite a challenge. While we looked for suitable options that met her needs, she used a corporate credit card as a deposit and then sent us a check to cover the cost. Now that you mentioned a problem with the rings, I want to assure you that our store provides a 90-day warranty in such situations. Perhaps the stone setting has become loose. This was puzzling because she had talked about replacing the wedding and engagement rings but never indicated that she had lost them, mentioning only the stolen purse. It took me a moment to process this new information. "Listen," I said to the woman on the phone. "I need to discuss this with my wife before making any further decisions. I'll contact you later." With that, I said goodbye, while she seemed somewhat perplexed. My own bewilderment was much greater. It was becoming increasingly obvious that the rings must have been in her purse when it was stolen. But why would she carry them in her purse if she wasn't trying to hide her marital status? To my knowledge, there were no professional restrictions related to disclosing one's marital status. However, if she wanted to appear unmarried in certain social circumstances, disturbing thoughts began circulating in my head, suggesting that she might have contemplated having an affair while away from home. The mere thought of it made my stomach churn. We had been married for 11 years and were blessed with 2 wonderful children, Jeremy, 8 years old, and Melissa, 6 years old. I believed we had a flawless marriage and a model family. Our intimate life seemed satisfactory to me, or at least I thought so. She traveled once a month, staying for 2 or 3 nights in distant cities. If she had such intentions, she might have seen this as a discreet opportunity. It seemed that losing the rings had deeply troubled her, prompting her to choose replacements that looked as similar as possible to the originals. I had bought those rings with my modest earnings, so they weren't extravagant, and creating a near-identical copy wasn't too expensive. She could have reported the loss to the insurance company, but I would have probably found out. If her purse was indeed stolen at the hotel, she must have filed a report. I was eager to find out what she had declared as missing. I decided to find the hotel's contact number and called. I asked if there were any records related to the theft of my wife's purse. To my surprise, they confirmed that a written incident report existed. I asked them to fax me a copy and soon received it. The report was filled out and signed by Claire herself. In the statement, Claire mentioned that her purse was stolen while she was dancing in the hall. She had left her purse in the booth where she was sitting, and upon returning, discovered it was gone. Notably, Claire had explicitly marked her unwillingness to involve the police. As I absorbed this information, my thoughts raced, overwhelmed by the implications of what I had discovered. She had deceived me not only by hiding the truth about the stolen rings, but also by fabricating a story about shoplifting. While there could be an alternative explanation, my mind couldn't come up with anything other than the disturbing thoughts spinning in my head. It became clear that I needed to uncover the meaning behind the loss of those rings. Otherwise, they would constantly occupy my thoughts and drive me insane. One thing was becoming increasingly evident. Those rings were in her purse when she was dancing with a strange man. Several weeks had passed since the incident, and she was scheduled for another trip in a few days. I realized I needed to gather more details about her upcoming travel schedule. I wanted to understand what she usually did on her evenings away from home. If she was involved with other men, perhaps losing the rings had served as a wake-up call, prompting her to reconsider her behavior. I knew that if I discovered her infidelity, it would essentially mean the end of our marriage, though I dreaded how it might affect our children. She was undoubtedly a wonderful mother, but I couldn't bear the thought of her getting custody of the kids, especially with her frequent business trips. My mind feverishly searched for any potential clues that could shed light on her fidelity. What other information could hint at her actions during her trips? Was she engaging in unprotected relations or insisting on using protection? I assumed she would choose protection because she wouldn't want to risk bringing home an infection or the possibility of an unwanted pregnancy. After all, I had had a vasectomy after our second child was born, making pregnancy impossible. She couldn't rely on the men she met to have protection, so she must have had her own supply. One question remained. Where did she keep them? It was unlikely she stored them in our house or car, so her office seemed the most probable place. She probably took them with her on business trips. I knew she carried her work papers, laptop, and presentation materials in a large briefcase that she kept in her office. But if she had a morning flight, she would bring the bag home the night before and then pack it in her suitcase for the airport. This detail was crucial. I needed to find an opportunity to search the briefcase before her departure. I hoped her next trip involved a morning flight. I consciously decided to remain calm and composed, showing no signs that anything was wrong. As often happens when the kids return from school, I was busy with various tasks and had little time to dwell on my suspicions. Nevertheless, the specter of her infidelity continued to loom in the back of my mind. When Claire returned from work, I found myself in a bit of a mess. While cooking dinner, I had accidentally spilled a dish of beans, creating a mess on the floor. The ensuing chaos of cleaning up and managing the kids' activity left me looking somewhat disheveled. Fortunately, she didn't seem to notice anything unusual about my behavior at that moment. After the commotion died down and everything was cleaned up, I met her with a kiss on the cheek. We sat down at the table as usual to enjoy dinner and engage in our usual chit-chat. Given our normal routine, I didn't expect her to have growing suspicions about her upcoming trip. "So, you're leaving on another trip in a couple of days?" I asked. "Yes," she replied without much enthusiasm. "The same old routine. I'm not looking forward to it." My curiosity prompted me to dig deeper. "If you don't like it, have you thought about applying for a different position? You've been with the company for quite some time and have a good grasp of various aspects of its operations. I think you could adapt to almost any position." She mentioned her desire to gain more experience before transitioning to a desk job. However, I gently appealed to her conscience regarding the children. "And I miss you terribly when you're not home," I added, hoping to evoke some guilt. "I know. I'm sorry," she replied sympathetically. "I miss all of you too." Wanting to know more details, I continued. "So, where exactly are you headed this time? Are you leaving in the morning, giving us a chance to spend some time together before you go?" I held her gaze, mindful that our children could hear us. Despite trying to appear normal, my anxiety was evident, as my stomach was growling and I found it difficult to eat. She seemed to think everything was fine, as her reaction mirrored mine. I wondered if she had stomach issues too, but it turned out she was eating without much enjoyment. Perhaps my suspicions were unfounded, but the desire to search her briefcase remained, as it could potentially provide insight into her loyalty. "I'm only going to Denton, so I'm leaving tomorrow morning at 7:30, she said. "I need something to sustain me until I get back on Friday," she added playfully, winking at me. I responded in an equally playful tone, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. To my surprise, she blushed in response. Her comment that she would bring her briefcase home the night before the trip suggested she wouldn't be stopping by the office before heading to the airport. Given her seemingly genuine attitude about the upcoming trip in front of our children and me, one could assume that either she wasn't involved in infidelity during her trips, or she had become skilled at concealing such behavior. I hoped to uncover the truth when I examined the contents of her briefcase the evening before her scheduled trip. Claire came home in a cheerful mood. She parked her car next to mine in the garage as usual and looked visibly excited. This made me wonder if her excitement was due to our conversation, or if there was another reason behind it. Entering the house, she didn't bring her briefcase with her. Assuming it was still in the car, I was busy preparing dinner, so we sat down to eat. She casually asked if I could fetch her suitcase from the garage after we ate. "Sure," I replied, trying not to show any signs of suspicion. "Are you all packed for the trip?" she asked, trying to reassure me. "Oh yes, it's a standard trip. My briefcase is in the car, ready for the journey. I'll pack an overnight bag with essentials." In an effort to maintain a sense of normalcy, I inquired, "Do you have any plans while you're away?" "No. The kids and I will stick to our usual daily routine during the week. Maybe we can plan something family-friendly for the weekend," she replied, showing enthusiasm for the idea. "Sounds like a plan," I answered genuinely. After we finished dinner, she kindly helped me clear the table in the kitchen and load the dishwasher. Finished, she headed to the bedroom to pack her things, and I went to the garage for her suitcase. Inspecting the car, I didn't find the briefcase inside, leading me to believe it was securely placed in the trunk. Anticipating this, I had already devised a plan to access it later that evening. When I returned to the bedroom with her suitcase, I casually asked, "Do you know where the car keys are? I think my tire has a slow leak. If I take it to the station, Jerry can fix it right away." For a moment she seemed puzzled, but then reached into her purse, handing me the car keys. She offered an alternative. "Can't you just use the spare tire? It's for emergencies." Taking a resolute stance, I answered, "Yes, the spare tire is for emergencies, but we have enough time to properly fix this one. I think it's the best course of action." I hurried back to the garage before she could change her mind. Quickly driving her car out of the garage, I headed to the junction station owned by my friend Jerry from school. Pulling up to one of the service bays, I honked to get his attention. Jerry noticed me and opened the bay door, letting me drive in, and then closed it behind me. "What's up, buddy?" Jerry asked curiously. I replied, "My tire was supposed to be fixed here, but I need a little time to check something." Sensing I might have trouble at home, he asked, "Problems at home, friend?" "Maybe." "Perhaps," I reluctantly admitted, opening the trunk and taking out Claire's briefcase, placing it on a nearby workbench. I opened it. Jerry, understanding a customer needed him, simply said, "Well, I have a customer, so take your time, my friend." Nodding to Jerry, he went back into the small shop attached to his station. I began thoroughly searching the briefcase, careful not to disturb anything. My hands unnecessarily explored the pockets on the lid, and to my shock, I discovered a package that caught my attention. As I pulled it out, my heart sank. I realized it was an open package of condoms, missing about 3. My worst fears were confirmed. I carefully placed the package back where I found it and closed the briefcase again. I stowed it in the trunk and secured it. Just then, Jerry returned. "Find what you were looking for?" "What's going on?" he asked with obvious curiosity. "I'm afraid I did," I answered, with a note of disappointment and sadness in my voice. "Mind if I stay here a little longer? Maybe check the tire pressure while I pretend to have fixed the problem?" Jerry gave me a curious look but complied without a word. He truly was a loyal friend. While he attended to the tire pressure, I drove out of the bay and pulled up to the gas station. I filled up the tank with fuel, not knowing when I would do it for her again. My thoughts were filled with gratitude towards Jerry for his understanding. As I drove home, a sense of darkness seemed to envelop my thoughts, and panic began to intensify, fueled by anger and disappointment. It was hard to understand how she could betray our marriage, our children, and me, like this. Amid the receding emotions, I shifted my focus to planning my next steps to secure custody of our children. I needed concrete evidence of her infidelity and misconduct. Despite her shortcomings as a partner, I acknowledged her role as a good mother. The children deserved a maternal figure in their lives. Although visitation rights would likely be granted, my ultimate goal was to get full legal custody. She would have to explain the reasons for our divorce to her brother and friends. Entering the house, I called out from the bedroom, "All done. It was just a minor issue with the nail." "Okay, thanks," she replied, still avoiding eye contact. Seeking comfort, I went to the kitchen for a beer, and then settled in the family room with the kids, who were absorbed in watching a TV show. About 30 minutes later, Claire joined us in the room and sat next to me on the couch. By then, my emotions had settled, but a deep sadness washed over me as I realized our once happy family would soon be a thing of the past. To my surprise, Claire moved closer and snuggled up to me, whispering in my ear, "Are you ready for tonight?" Taking a sip of beer, I replied, "I think so, but my stomach is upset." Claire responded with sympathy, "Oh, that's too bad, honey." Holding on to me, Claire softly said, "I love you," and I instinctively put my arm around her shoulders, wrestling with mixed feelings. Despite her betrayal, there was still a hint of affection from her. I couldn't help but wonder why she had done it. Was it for the thrill or due to a need for a connection I couldn't provide? I might never fully understand, but what was clear was the damage to my trust in her. We put the kids to bed together, and as she kissed our little angels goodnight, I couldn't help but watch her, knowing she would be gone by morning. Their young minds were already accustomed to her frequent trips, so their anxiety was minimal. That night we made love, but it lacked the usual passion. Sensing my distress, Claire asked with concern, "Is your stomach still bothering you, honey?" I nodded and replied, "Yes, but I can manage." Desperately hoping she would choose our love and marriage over the upcoming trip, I asked, "Do you really have to go on this trip?" Deep down, I wished it was all just a nightmare that would disappear. She sighed and replied apologetically, "I'm sorry, honey, but this trip is necessary. I'll do my best to wrap things up and come home as soon as possible. I'm really looking forward to the weekend with all of you." With a heavy heart, I sighed and said, "Okay, dear, time for bed. You have to get up early for your flight. I'll take a quick shower now so I don't have to worry about it in the morning." "Okay," I replied as she went into the shower. An impulse led me to inspect her suitcase to see what she had packed. While the clothes on top seemed businesslike, I was surprised to find, upon closer inspection, a selection of her most seductive lingerie and a little black cocktail dress in which she always looked irresistible. Respecting her personal space, I carefully returned everything to its place, closed the suitcase, and went back to bed. I couldn't sleep that night, and when I heard Claire tossing and turning around 5 a.m., I stayed in bed, deciding not to say goodbye to her as was our custom. I felt a mix of weariness and sadness. Leaning over to kiss me on the cheek before leaving, she asked, "Still not feeling well, honey?" I simply nodded, struggling to express the storm inside me. With the sound of the garage door closing, I finally got out of bed and headed for the shower. I knew the coming day would be filled with challenges. After seeing the kids off to school and having breakfast, I turned to the phone book to find private investigator services in the yellow pages. My main criteria were to find an agency with a nationwide presence, preferably in the city Claire was headed to. I contacted several agencies and eventually found one with a branch in her destination area. I arranged to meet with them that same morning, hoping they could provide the necessary information. The next item on my list was to find a divorce lawyer. A friend had recommended a specific attorney, so I found his contact details and called him. I scheduled an appointment for the afternoon, hoping this lawyer could guide me through the complicated process we faced. When I arrived at the private investigator's office, I discussed my concerns and arranged for surveillance on Claire for the evening she was away. I provided them with a photo of Claire and details of her itinerary to aid in their identification. They assured me they would gather photographs and compile a report on her activities as soon as her workday ended. To ensure seamless communication, they agreed to email the information to their office in Denton and promised to provide a comprehensive report by Monday morning. Satisfied with their commitment, I made a substantial upfront payment as a prepayment for their services. They informed me they might not be able to get photographs but would strive to provide as many incriminating photos as possible. I agreed that would suffice. My afternoon meeting with the lawyer went as expected. He explained that in our state, divorce follows the no-fault principle, meaning there's no need to assign blame. However, given that I am the primary caregiver for our children, I would likely be granted custody. It was crucial for me to understand that Claire would receive substantial visitation rights for our children. Furthermore, our property would be divided equally, with a 50-50 split. Alimony wouldn't be necessary due to our similar incomes, but since I would have custody of the children, Claire would be obligated to pay child support. As for the inheritance she received, it held no significance for me, and she needed to retain it for herself. My top priority was the well-being of our children. I instructed the lawyer to prepare the necessary documents for serving Claire on Monday, citing irreconcilable differences. I also asked for her to agree to vacate our home immediately following our divorce. The lawyer confirmed that as the children's guardian, I had the authority to make this request. It was decided that once the children turned 18, we would sell the house and the proceeds would be divided between us. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt a sense of contentment, realizing that life would move forward for me and the children, while Claire would have to face the consequences of her betrayal. At that moment, I didn't take immediate action regarding our finances, insurance, or other legal matters. I assumed I would have sufficient time to address those issues after serving her with the divorce papers. Given her inheritance, I believed she wouldn't have to worry about her share of our joint savings. When it was time for school to end, I headed home to meet the bus. On Friday afternoon, when Claire returned, I kindly offered to take care of her laundry, but she politely declined, insisting she would handle it herself later. I couldn't help but smirk, recognizing how playfully mischievous I was being. Deep down, I fully comprehended why she preferred to manage the laundry herself. It was crucial for her to keep her extramarital affairs concealed at all costs. Later, as we lay in bed, Claire expressed concern about my ongoing stomach problems and suggested I see a doctor. "It's been going on for too long?" she emphasized. I playfully replied to Claire, letting her know I intended to try a new medicine recommended by a friend to solve my persistent stomach issues. I expressed optimism that it would resolve the problem and return her to me soon. As we hugged, she whispered that she had missed me very much. On Monday, after the children had left for school and Claire had gone to work, I received a call from the detective agency informing me that the report was ready. I told them I would be there soon, and within 30 minutes I was sitting with the office manager discussing the details. The office manager informed me that the report with attached photographs had been faxed over from Denton that morning. He admitted he hadn't had time to read the entire report, but from a quick glance and a look at the photos, it looked highly incriminating. I took a copy of the report and began to read its contents. The subject of the report was identified as Claire Barton. According to the report, surveillance on the woman began at 5:17 p.m. on Wednesday, June 16th, in the lobby of the Denton Marriott Hotel. Her identity was confirmed by comparison with the photograph obtained from the Merville office. Upon closer inspection of the report, it turned out she was wearing a company badge, further confirming her identity. Moreover, the report detailed the subject's movements and noted that she was carrying a briefcase when she entered the elevator. An employee accompanied her and verified her arrival in room 414 at 5:23 p.m. Importantly, the report emphasized that the subject was alone at that time. Additionally, a photograph marked as Exhibit 1A was included in the report, showing the subject dressed professionally before entering the room. Looking at the photo, one could see she was still wearing the rings. Obviously, the photo had been taken discreetly with a mobile phone. The report stated that agents had rented a room opposite the subject's room. At 6:31 p.m., they received a signal that the subject had left her room and was heading to the elevator. A minute later, at 6:32 p.m., the subject exited the elevator and entered the lobby. The report noted she was dressed as described in Example 1B. Upon considering Example 1B, it became evident that Claire was in a little black cocktail dress paired with high heels. She was also wearing a necklace I had given her for our 10th anniversary. However, what stood out most was the absence of wedding rings on her left hand. The photo clearly showed she was not wearing them. A photo identified as Exhibit 1D shows Claire and a man in a tight embrace, engaged in a passionate kiss, sitting in a booth. The intensity of their connection was clearly visible in the picture. At 8:51 p.m., the report noted that both individuals left the restaurant. They then took the elevator and went up to Claire's floor. Another photo, labeled Exhibit 1E, captures the moment Claire and the man entered her room, specifically room 414. In this image, Claire appears slightly intoxicated but undeniably pleased with the evening's events. At 11:13 p.m., the man exited Claire's room and left the building. The report included the license plate number of a car registered to Alexander B. Tate, residing at 1424 Alia Drive in Denton. Notably, Alexander B. Tate was married and had 2 small children. Delving further into the details of the report, it became evident that Claire repeated her actions the following night with a different man. The report bore the signature of the investigator from Denton. This revelation filled me with deep anxiety and resentment. It became clear that my wife was leading a promiscuous life while away from home. I couldn't come to terms with her actions. This was a betrayal that surpassed my worst expectations. Even the fact that Claire had lost her wedding rings didn't stop her from being careless. Settling the bill with the private detective, I thanked them and left. I made sure to take 2 additional copies of the report, which were also recorded on a CD for safekeeping. Returning home, I, without delay, immediately called my divorce lawyer. I asked about the status of the divorce papers, and the lawyer confirmed they were ready to be filed. Without hesitation, I instructed them to initiate the filing process, and specifically requested that the papers be served to her publicly at her workplace the next day. The lawyer assured me this could be done smoothly and asked for her workplace address, which I promptly provided. My intentions were clear. I aimed to humiliate her during the proceedings. Serving her divorce papers at her workplace not only satisfied my desire for revenge, but also served as a form of justice for her actions. That night, there was no intimacy between us. Claire seemed to sense that something was wrong, perhaps suspecting I had discovered something disturbing. Although she didn't voice her concerns directly, she expressed hope for my quick recovery. Interestingly, she also seemed somewhat reserved. But I decided not to comment on it, and simply ignored it. The next morning, I woke up early after a night with little sleep. I immersed myself in work at the computer until I heard the children waking up, then went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. After eating, I said goodbye to Claire as she left for work. She came to me for a hug and a kiss, but I responded with a half-playful embrace, urging her to leave quickly. At that moment, I felt she might have had an inkling of what awaited her. As I closed the door behind her, tears welled up in her eyes and she whispered, "I love you." After her departure, a deep sadness washed over me, and I felt the urge to let my tears flow. Nevertheless, I quickly composed myself, as the children required my attention, and I needed to prepare them for the school bus. Around 10:45 a.m., the phone rang, interrupting our morning routine. The caller ID displayed Claire's workplace. I answered the call without uttering a word, and there was a brief pause as the caller realized I was not inclined to talk. In a trembling voice and a whisper, Claire said, "I'm sorry." Soon after, the line fell silent, and I, too, remained silent. Claire did not return home that night, and I wondered if she was continuing her deceitful game, seemingly indifferent to her husband. Although I acknowledged that my anger was justified, I also considered that I might have been overly harsh towards her. The children, saddened by their mother's absence, asked where she was. To cheer them up, I invited them to have dinner at a McDonald's cafe. By the time we returned home after dinner, the children were exhausted and went straight to bed. The next morning, Claire called with a request. "Honey, can I come home and collect my things? Can we talk?" Initially, a feeling of guilt rose within me, but it quickly dissipated. I calmly replied, "Why don't you come between 9 a.m. and noon, as I had planned? The kids and I won't be here then. As for our conversation, I make it clear that I will speak with her one-on-one in my lawyer's office only after she has signed, had notarized, and returned the divorce papers. Then I will listen to whatever you have to say." Sobbing could be heard over the line before Claire responded. "Okay." Soon after, the phone fell silent again. She signed the divorce papers, and 6 months later, our marriage officially came to an end. It turned out she had gotten pregnant during the affair. Unfortunately, when she tried to hide it from her latest lover, the contraception failed. Given that it was near her childbearing age, even if I hadn't found out about her infidelity through the lost rings, the truth would probably have surfaced eventually. There were rumors that she had started dating again. If she ever gets close to marriage again, I thought about honestly warning her future spouse about her infidelity. It seemed unnecessary for her to deceive and hurt another person. We had a meeting, and during the conversation in my lawyer's office, I shared my thoughts with her. She begged me to reconsider the divorce decision. She talked about how difficult it was for her not to have unlimited access to our children. However, I explained that I could no longer trust her. Then she mentioned that she had seen a psychologist who diagnosed her with nymphomania. She assured me her impulses were now under control. Despite her explanations, I told her it wasn't enough for me. Even if she claimed to control her urges, the fact that she hadn't sought help earlier indicated a lack of proactive effort on her part. If she had addressed her cravings from the beginning, she might not have found herself in the current situation. As I was leaving the lawyer's office, she continued to cry. Recently, I reconnected with a school friend who keeps me updated on events. I learned that he works at a nightclub. He mentioned he had seen my ex-wife at the club where he works on several weekend evenings. She often visits the club with different men and behaves provocatively. I was deeply hurt that my children had such an irresponsible mother. Perhaps my ex-wife never recovered from her nymphomania. A friend of Claire's also called me and reported that Claire was in poor health. She said my ex-wife needed my assistance because she had contracted herpes. Meanwhile, she continued her promiscuous lifestyle. I sympathized with her but conveyed that I couldn't offer any help, nor did I want to. Claire had chosen this lifestyle and the associated health problems. I started dating again, and it seems I've found someone special. This woman, about my age and also divorced, discovered her ex-husband's infidelity and didn't tolerate such behavior. She possesses strength and resilience, qualities I genuinely admire. My children seem to like her too. I believe it's a natural progression, and it's only a matter of time before I consider taking our relationship to the next level.